Okay, so we're going to install this throwout bearing into this clutch fork here. This is a brand new bearing I got from O'Reilly's National Bearing. National makes good bearings. So one thing to note, when you put this bearing in, you see this little tab here that sticks up like a teardrop. It goes in a certain way. You want the teardrop to be facing the flat side of this fork, not the rounded side. Remember, the rounded side of the bearing always faces the rounded side. The point faces toward the flat. And the reason for that is when you put it in here, when this is in, and this goes above those forks, but I'm just showing you for representation. Like when you put that teardrop in here, when it's in like it's supposed to be, it keeps it from turning in case the bearing should go bad. It's keep it from turning on here, onto these prongs and everything. So make sure you put that in correctly. It won't necessarily hurt it if you put the teardrop facing this way, but it won't, it's not right. And it's tighter of a fit, so you might take some of your alignment away from it. And it moves in here too. When this clutch fork moves, you know, it moves like this to push it. And the bearing's in here and it pivots. So you want to make sure you got plenty of free space to pivot so you're not binding up on your shaft on the transmission or nothing. Before we install this, we got to grease some points on this. We need to grease this here where the bearing rides. We also need to put a good amount of grease in here where the pivot ball sits, and some grease on these tongues here, and also on here. And that's all for the clutch fork. You want to make sure you got good grease on those contacts. When it comes to the bearing, you want to make sure that you put a good amount of grease in here. You can see how it's got like this ridge in here. And that's to kind of gather grease and keep grease in here. So when it's sliding up and down the shaft of the transmission, it doesn't run dry. So you want to do that. You want to make sure you put grease in here. Probably wouldn't hurt since the tongue's right here. You might want to put a little bit of grease around this flat surface. So if it does move a little bit, there's always grease contact. Also, it wouldn't hurt to put a light film of grease on the surface here. Even though your clutch fingers are here, like this is your clutch, pretend, and this is the bearing, and it sits there and it spins like this. The grease is not going to cause it to slip on the clutch, because there's going to be so much pressure that it's still going to engage like that. So yeah, that's all there really is to it. You just want to make sure you put a good amount of grease in here, and then a thin film around this edge right here. Also, one more thing to note is you want to put, like for instance, on this here, this is for the cable right here. You might want to put a little bit of grease in here as well, a thin film where the cable rides. But I have this adapter for a hydraulic clutch, so it's the same concept. You see how it's beveled here? It's beveled just like that. I'll put a thin film of grease in here as well, so then it'll cut down on friction. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and grease this thing up and get it ready to install the throwout bearing, so then we can get it installed back in the transmission. I'm just gonna use some wheel bearing grease. That's all you need. Take some on your finger and grease these spots here. Put some grease on there where that bearing rides. You don't have to worry about putting too much. You'd rather have too much than not enough. That looks good. Now, we can come over here, put a thin film on these as well. Put a generous amount in where this pivot ball goes. And then you can also put some on these if you want to, but go underneath it if you want to. It's not really that important for these, but you want to make sure you got some in there. All right, then we'll put a little bit in here, like I said. There we go. All right, now we want to get this prepped and ready. So take a thin layer and put around this edge right here. Now I'd recommend putting a good amount on here, especially in that ridge right there. I'd want to coat that ridge really good so it'll hold that grease in there. That's what it's there for anyway. And when you push this on, there's a good chance that a lot of this will get pushed off, but inside this divot, I guess you'd say, or this ridge, whatever you want to call it, this galley, it should keep a good amount of grease in there. And that's what that's there for, is to hold it. Put a good amount of grease on there. Good to go. Now, if you want to, you could actually work this on the shaft up and down a couple of times before you install it. Just to, you can wipe up any excess that may get pushed out. That way you'll know. Now we'll take any residuals and just lightly rub the face of it. Don't have to put a lot on here, just a very thin film. All the way around. Just like so. Good to go. Alright, now we're ready to install our throwout bearing onto our clutch fork. So it goes like this. So like I said, make sure the teardrop is facing toward the flat side of the clutch fork. So we're going to install it just like this. Push those tangs down and work that bearing on there. Just like so. See how that teardrop side is facing the flat side? That's perfect. So now if this turns in there, it'll hit the side here and keep it from spinning inside there. And you can take it and push it all the way back if you like. And then when you install it in the transmission, it'll self-center itself. There we go. That's ready to be installed in the car. When you go to install this on that ball pivot, be very careful with these tabs. Do not break them. They will break. They can break, I should say. So be careful. I'm going to show you an easy way to put this on there without breaking them. But if you break these, break one or both of these, it's no good. You got to go buy another clutch fork. There's nothing to hold it there. Technically, you don't really need them once the transmission is installed because there's pressure on this. And this is close enough to the clutch that it can't fall out. And this is on the shaft of the transmission anyway. So it should hold it in there. But this holds it on that ball socket until you get the transmission installed so it don't fall down. You try to install this without that, it's not going to sit there. It'd be very hard to install the transmission into the bell housing without those tabs. So be mindful of that. All right, so we go to install the clutch fork. We want to go in from the side. There's a hole over here, an access hole. You can bring it up from the side here, and you can also install the bearing after you put the fork through if that's easier. I like to try to get it in here with it all assembled though. I just take my time, work it in from the side like this. And then you can slowly work it around in there like that. And now it's installed. We're ready to install it onto this pivot here. All right, so we're going to install this on that pivot. You're going to be very careful not to break those tabs. So what you might have to do is get a screwdriver, because see how they want to spread apart? If that's the case, you might have to get a screwdriver in here to like hold that one tab. Okay, so I weren't able to show you the easy way, so to speak, of how to install that because you got to install it with the bell housing off the car, and I ain't pulling the bell housing off. But basically what you'd want to do if the bell housing's off the car is you want to tilt this like to the side and start one ear, and then you can just kind of roll it over and the other one will clip on. In this case, what I had to do, because you got to be very careful, them clips will break. I've broke them. Matter of fact, this is a brand new clutch fork. The one that wasn't here, I broke by mistake because the ear got bent and I tried to bend it back and it just broke. So what you got to do is, what I did is I took a pry bar in here, and as I'm pushing this fork on, you'll see those ears. You'll see those ears like spread apart and like want to go around it instead of over it. So what I did is I would get one going and I put the pry bar in here and work it easily, back and forth, work both of them easily and evenly until they both just slid up into place. Once they're up in place, you don't have to worry about it. But you got to be very careful with that there. Keep that in mind. Also, another thing you can do You can see where the clutch is. You can try to help line this up. The transmission will align itself, but you could always move this over a little bit to make it easier to line up if you want. Yep, now we're ready to install the transmission.